Here at Sermons on the Couch, we're going to do on the couch today. And this is a week where thought of a topic to talk about. The Pope had passed, I think it was last week, and seeing, a lot on it. Places we went, we had our grandson's communion on Saturday and, Unity Church, different places were talking. I mean, the whole world was probably talking about it. And it's really interesting. I think that there's some things that we can study in the course can learn and see. And, I mean, the Pope is such a great man, such a great man. I don't know the Pope, and which is really interesting because do we ever even see anyone? Or do we see what we've been fed or pictures of them, what we've been told about them, our past memories of them? It's interesting that we actually don't really see another human being. We see what our projections really are, that they show up a certain way in accordance with those projections. So is the Pope a good man or a bad man? I don't know. It's not, that's why none of us can really judge because it's not up to me to say whether that is or not, because I don't even see the Pope. I only see a body, and this goes for everyone in our life. It's interesting. I know there's all different sides of the fence and even schools of thought. You look at some of the symbolism in Catholicism. Is it really in alignment with Christ? It's not, again, up for me to judge that. I see really interesting symbols, whether it's at Vatican City, and it brings a lot of this up around this conversation. And I think that, you think about from a Course in Miracles perspective, the church is never about the symbols. The church is any place that has an altar within it. So really, you and I are the church ultimately, whether you want to say Jesus' church or the Holy Spirit's church, and that the altar is within us. That's why no physical structure or any symbols could really give us the teaching of the Christ, because what Jesus was talking about, which is very interesting because Jesus really had nothing in terms of the physical world, he wasn't, it wasn't, I mean, he was living hand to mouth in a lot of ways. People were taking care of him and the apostles, and they were traveling a lot. So it's very interesting of what do these symbols mean for us? And where do we make idols as though the thing, whether it's this really beautiful church or these really long gowns and all these things, do we think that they bring us to the truth? Do they bring us to the Christ? Or what Jesus was really teaching was something even subtler and deeper than that ultimately. Not that those things are necessarily bad, even in things like The Chosen, where they illustrate Judaism and, they have the prayer ties and whatever reminds us of God ultimately in the end. The Holy Spirit can use any symbols, but where do we think that the symbol is the thing itself rather than go to the hidden altar within us? And it's only hidden by the ego's voice, by the ego's curriculum, by the ego's teaching. And ultimately, thinking of the Pope, I said I started with the Pope died. Actually, I want to propose here, and this is not my teaching, which makes it so easy, is that what Jesus really was teaching is about overcoming death. And I'm going to read something from the Course. That's really ultimately the message of the crucifixion and the resurrection, is that we don't die in the end. We're pure, free, eternal beings. That's the teaching of the Christ. And whether it's the Bible, whether it's Course in Miracles, the deeper you start to go into some of these teachings, you start to see that that's really ultimately, it doesn't take a lot to see that that's ultimately Jesus' teaching. Did the Pope transcend death in his own thoughts and his own mind? I have no idea. Again, that's why I'm not in a place ever to judge anyone. It's really ultimately between him and God, and you and God, and me and God. And if you want to say from the Course, you and the Holy Spirit. And when we understand that this is really ultimately a game of transcending death, that's where we're headed. And this is in the Course, in the Manual for Teachers, What is Death? And in paragraph 6, it says, and quote, I think this is in the Bible, and the last to be overcome will be death. Of course, without the idea of death, there is no world. All dreams will end with this one. This is salvation's final goal, the end of all illusions. And in death are all illusions born. What can be born of death and still have life? But what is born of God and still can die? The inconsistencies, the compromises, and the rituals the world fosters in its vain attempts to cling to death and yet to think that love is real are mindless magic, ineffectual and meaningless. God is, and in him all created things must be eternal. So ultimately, I mean, really, my wife would say is whether it's the Pope or anyone knows the secret, because when we let go of the body, we really see ourselves as spirit, as eternal, never born, never dying spirit. It's a whole different perspective. Us right now are not ready for that conversation, right? We're ready for the conversation here, but we're not ready for the actual reality of that. That's why we have A Course in Miracles. That's why Jesus was teaching us to start to train our minds to transcend death while we have a body. And that's the curriculum of this game. And then ultimately, when we get that curriculum so deeply, there's no need for a body anymore. And there's no need for even a world and time. That's a whole different conversation. What the course would call knowledge, that's not the scope of this course and the scope of what we talk about here. And did the Pope realize that in his final moments or leading up to his final days? I have no idea. And I'm in no place to judge. But I'll tell you this, for you and for me, while we still have a breath and we still have this body, let's use our life really, as he says in the course, using time solely as a means of regaining eternity. And you can use your life in every day like that. Whether the Pope did that or not is really ultimately none of our business in the end. That's between him and the Holy Spirit. What is it between you and the Holy Spirit that's going to bring you to ultimately waking up to, as Jesus said, everlasting life?